Hello, welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia. When a company's focused entirely on treading water and protecting the status quo, providing good positions for intelligent and ambitious new hires can be very difficult. And if you're just going to be wasting hotshot talent on trivial chores, might as well just hire cheaper, less skilled workers to start off with, or so the thinking goes. As for why I'm bringing this up all of a sudden, it recently occurred to me that Kazuki's situation within our team is something like that of the elite graduate in a recession. She has exceptional, even unique skills. In terms of raw ability, she's in a different league than from Captain Sakashika, but since her rank is freshman, the very bottom of the totem pole, that talent puts her in an awkward position. Everyone recognizes and respects Kazuki's intelligence, but that doesn't mean they're ready to overturn our familiar system of authority, mainly because nobody knows where they'd stand in the new pecking order. Kazuki told me that pride isn't inherently a bad thing. The way she sees it, a moderate sense of self-respect can be a balm for the soul, but still, an overdose of medicine is just another way of poisoning yourself.
Amane, どこにいるの？こっちだよ、カズキ。あ、いたいた。あなた、また日記をつけていたの？なんていうか、癖で暇な時に思いついたことを書き殴ってるだけなんだけどね。いいことよ。こんな状況だからこそ、そういった日常の行動が心を安定させるし、日記をつけることで現状を深く理解して、客観的かつ冷静な判断力を得るという意味ではとても有効だと思うわ。いや、そこまで考えて書いてたわけじゃないけどね。日記ってそういうものよ。私もよく書くもの。カズキも？ええ、紙に書くことはしないけれど。どういうこと？脳に書き込んでいるのよ。それって頭の中身を頭に記してることにならない？通常記憶用の脳みそと日記用の脳みそを使い分けているのよ。私、脳みそが5、6個あるってお医者様に言われたことがあるの。本当に？もちろん冗談よ。
As always, Kazuki's attempt at a joke wasn't amusing in the slightest. The idea of her having half a dozen brains stashed away somewhere like some biological supercomputer felt far too plausible. I felt more like shuddering than laughing.
で、私に何か用事？うん、そうだった。ちょっと毒ダミの葉を摘んできてもらえないかしら。毒ダミってあの臭いやつ？そう。沢の近くにたくさん自生していたでしょ。あれを摘んできてほしいの。まさかあれ食べるの？食べられないわけじゃないけど、今回は薬に使うわ。薬？何の？かゆみ止め。薬のストックが乏しくなってきているから、代用の効くものは代用します。できればよもぎなんかもあると嬉しいけれど。よもぎって草餅に練り込むあれのこと？どんな草なの？見たことないの？どこにでも自生しているのに。ああ、これでも私都会っ子だし、草餅は作ったことあるけど、業務用のペーストを使ってたから。仕方がないわね。
Kazuki pursed her lips and glanced around the area. Her gaze settled on Koide Ritsu, who was sitting idly on top of a rock nearby, apparently not quite sure what to do with herself.
小出さん、私、彼女と草摘みに行こうと思うのだけれど、大テントで広岡さんと桜井さんに付き添っていてもらえませんか？汗を拭いたり水を飲ませてあげる程度ですから、何も面倒はないと思います。お願いできますか？すぐに戻りますから。
わかったわ。
さて、それじゃあ行きましょうか。
いいの？
何が？
だって小出さんは。
She was Captain Sakashita's partner. If our leader were to find out Kazuki had been ordering her friend around, I had the feeling things might get ugly again.
いいんじゃない？彼女、することもなくて暇そうだったし。こんな状況だし、することがないとサボっているようで気まずいでしょうしね。
そっか。
Our supply of food was limited and shrinking. Under the circumstances, idle hands could be seen as a drain on our resources. The sick and injured had no choice, but for those of us still healthy, there wasn't much excuse for being anything less than proactive. Koide Senpai's partner, Captain Sakashita, was currently off investigating the area with Mr. Ochi. Why hadn't they taken Koide along on their survey? Did they simply decide she would have slowed them down? I couldn't think of any other reason they would have just ditched her here.
ねえ、和樹はどう思う？
そうね。ただ単に小出さんのことが気に入らないんじゃないかしら。
どうして？
ここに来た初日に怪我人の治療をするために、私は小出さんにお湯を沸かしてくださいってお願いしたでしょ？
うん。
それで小出さんは部長の許可をもらわずにペットボトルのミネラルウォーターを勝手に使ってしまったの。そのことで部長が怒ったら、小出さんはだって風見さんがやれって言ったからと答えちゃったのね。
ああ、つまり部長より和樹の言葉を優先したのが気に入らないと。
そういうこと。何の疑問もなく私の命令に従ってしまった小出さんは、部長の中ではもう私のシンパとして認識されているのかもしれないわね。
そんな、この非常時にそんなこと。
言ってる場合じゃないのは部長も分かっているとは思うけれど、仕方がないわよ。女の子ってそういうものでしょ。
まあね。
Female friendships tend to be power-based. Specifically, when girls choose their friends, they pick someone they think of as an inferior. A girl inferior in academics. A girl inferior in appearance. A girl inferior at sports. Anything will do as long as they are clear inferior in some respect. We can graciously and confidently allow them to become our friend.
せっかくお友達になってあげたのに、私よりその子がいいならその子とお友達になればいいじゃないって、そんな感じなんじゃないかしら。
でもそれを言ったら他の子たちはなんだかんだ言っても
This is
結局
strange.
みんな和樹の言うことを聞いてるじゃない。
私の言うことを聞いているというのとは少し違うんじゃないかしら。何か行動を起こそうというときは言い出した人間が責任者になるわけだし、現状を維持しようという保留案を提示した私に成り行きで同意しているだけじゃない？
そうかな。やっぱりみんな 和樹のこと天才だって思ってるし、従っていれば間違いないって思ってるんじゃ。
だから人に天才だって言われるのは嫌なんだってば。私を羨ましいなんて思わないことね。天才になんかなったところで得られるのは賞賛じゃなくて敵意と嫉妬だけよ。
そういうもの？
ええ、そう。私に友達がいなかった理由はそれよ。あなたが我慢強い子で助かるわ、あまね。
どういたしまして。というか、和樹本当に友達いなかったんだ。
Well, she definitely didn't have the most outgoing personality. I could picture her going out and trying to make a friend. Couldn't picture her going out and trying to make a friend. I'd spent most of 3 days glued to her by now, but if not for that accident, it was hard to imagine we would have ever gotten to know each other like this.
そのとっつきの悪さと遠慮を知らない口ぶりと人を小バカにしたような態度を直せば友達できると思うよ。
それは私に別人になれと言っているようなものじゃないかしら。
まあそうなるかな。
今さら私の性格が変わったらむしろみんな気持ち悪いって言うんじゃないかしら。
寂しくないの？
今はあなたがいるし、それに弟がいるからそれほど寂しいとは思わないわね。
和樹、弟なんているの？
ええ、いるわよ。
やっぱりあれ、和樹に似てるの？
似ているかと聞かれればあまり似ていない。あの子は私と違って母親似だから。そうね、優しいだけが取り柄みたいなところがあって可愛らしい子よ。
へえ、やっぱりその子も頭いい？
どうかしら。バカではないとは思うけれど変に生真面目で不器用だし、私の弟って時点でどうしても比較されてしまうし、ちょっと頑張った程度じゃ誰も認めてはくれないのよね。そのことでは随分と悩んでいるみたい。
そっか。
Not surprising, I guess. Kazuki would be one incredibly hard act to follow. Everyone would naturally be expecting great things of her brother. Held up against the standard of his elder sister, the best achievements of a normal person would seem commonplace. At most, you could hope for a tepid, just what I expect from Kazuki's brother. But any minor mistake would get you a disappointed look that might as well be saying, "Are you really related to that genius?" I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy.
なんかちょっとかわいそうかも。
同情はやめてあげて。あの子がますます惨めな思いをするから。
ごめん。
確かにあの子に失望する声も多いし、それは両親ですら例外じゃない。でも私はあの子がとても大事だし、あの子をとてもそれでいいのよ。たとえ世界中があの子を嫌っても、私が誰よりもあの子を愛している事実は変わらないのだから。
偏ってるな。相手は弟なんでしょ？
そうかしら。まあ確かに変質している自覚はあるけれど、弟に甘い姉というのも別に珍しくはないでしょ。
甘い？和樹が甘い？
I'd always viewed Kazami Kazuki as something like a walking beaker of acid in a school uniform. Sweet struck me as the single least appropriate adjective you could possibly apply to her.
そんなに驚くようなこと？弟なんだから可愛がるのは当たり前でしょ。これでも一応優しいお姉ちゃんのつもりなのだけれど。
似合わない。全然似合わない。びっくりするぐらい似合わない。
Kazuki, the girl would probably take one look at the classic abandoned puppy in a cardboard box on a rainy day, tell it fate is cruel, I suggest you curse the heavens, and then walk right off without batting an eyelid? Kazuki, of all people, a doting big sister? I impulsively pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and checked the date.
あれ、今日は4月1日じゃないよね。
あなた、失礼にも程があるわよ。私だって人間だもの。弟を可愛がりもするし、弟が落ち込んでいれば不器用ながらも慰めようと試みることぐらいはするわ。
Kazuki was such a dry-eyed, tough-minded person that I guess I figured she was above any form of deep emotional attachment. To be honest, I could easily imagine her looking down on her newborn brother in a hospital incubator, muttering something like, "What do you think you're doing? I don't recall giving you permission to be born. You've thrown off my plans well."
あなた、今とんでもなく失礼なことを考えていない？
ない。
When Kazuki fixed those inky blank eyes on me, it felt as though she was glaring right through my skull and into my thoughts. Flustered, I shook my head in denial.
ねえ、弟さんってそんなに可愛いの？
そうね。思わずキスしたくなるぐらい可愛いわ。
へえ。
Hearing all this was getting me a little interested in seeing him for myself.
実際何度かキスをしたけれど、何度しても飽きないわね。
え？
Given into temptation? Kissing her brother? On the cheek or something, right? I didn't have any brothers, so I didn't quite get it, but maybe that wasn't too out of the ordinary for a close pair of siblings?
本当に可愛いわ。
Somehow the smile on Kazuki's face didn't seem particularly innocent. Even for a close pair of siblings? No, especially for a close pair of siblings. Wasn't that a little abnormal? Just what was this girl doing to her brother?
どうかした？あなた、顔が赤いわよ。
あのさ、今ここで私が道徳を解き始めたらあなた笑う？
内容によるわね。
Kazuki's way of showing her affection for her sibling was clearly wrong. I never expected to be explaining a fundamental mistake like this to her, of all people. When I gently prodded her for more information, I soon discovered she was still taking baths with her brother. While Kazuki's body wasn't exactly well developed, she did have curves in the right places. Bathing with your brother at that age is more than a little dicey, right? Even at the best of times, the love between a brother and sister is built on a fairly precarious balance, and Little Miss Genius here had definitely taken things well beyond the tipping point. Skirting around the larger issue, I gingerly pushed the conversation along by hinting that the baths really needed to stop, prompting her to inquire, "Is sleeping together at night also off limits?" in a slightly objective tone of voice. And when I went soft, mumbling something about maybe every once in a while, she fired off a cheerful, "And it's okay to give him specific lessons on the birds and the bees, right?" So she was innocent at first, and now, now this is happening. I don't know. Hey, mind if I ask you something? To be honest, I feel a little silly asking a question like this to the infamous prodigy Kanami Kazuki, but I just can't help myself. I'm burning with curiosity. Here goes. Hey, might you be completely out of your mind? Okay, look, this is the only way of life I know. It really isn't helping me deal with this, you know? Can you cut a girl a break here?
というか、今まで誰も注意しなかったの？例えばほら、母親とかさ。
そういえば子供の頃にお外ではしないようにねってそう言われたような気がするわ。
家の中でなら OK なのかよ。
It sounds like their mother made some mistakes here as well. Some pretty fundamental ones, actually. It wasn't hard to imagine Kazuki's home must have been an unusual place, since it was the environment that produced a super genius, but this freakish lack of common sense was well beyond my expectations.
とにかく間違ってるから、このままじゃ和樹の弟絶対にろくな大人にならないよ。
そう？これでも結構真面目に育てているつもりなのだけれど。
どの辺が？
ありがとうって上手に言える子に育てているの。
どういう意味？
言葉の通りよ。素直に人に感謝することができるって素晴らしいと思わない？
そりゃまあ。
そう、例えばあなたの口癖のごめんなさいだけど、人に迷惑をかけた時素直に謝罪できるのって素晴らしいことよ。
そうかな。
I wasn't trying to make it my catchphrase, but I was taught from a young age that if you think you did something bad, apologize first and make excuses later. It was a major pillar of the vinegary education in manners I received from my mom.
それと同じことよ。人に感謝することができる人間はできない人間よりも幸せな人生を歩めると思わない？
確かに。
It may be a subtle difference as often as not, but if you can remember to show your gratitude in small ways, never taking the goodwill of others for granted, your life will probably end up ever so slightly the richer for it.
あれ、和樹あんた、今ちょっといいこと言った？
あなた本当に失礼ね。私はいつだっていいことしか言わないでしょ。それこそ私の言葉をまとめれば風見和樹名言集として税込み1890円で売れるぐらいよ。
何その微妙にリアルな値段設定。
What publisher would make a hardcover edition of that anyway? I could just picture it. Chapter 1. Taking a bath with your little brother is not a crime. Maybe the better question is, what's the target audience for a book written by a woman who sexually harasses her own little brother? No, her main thing is that she's smart. Why is it suddenly this?
お風呂か。そういえば。
It had already been 3 days since the last time I washed myself. 3 days I'd spent in a humid ravine, wearing the same unwashed school uniform. I pinched my clothes and brought my fingers to my nose, then quickly jerked my head back at the raw, sharp body odor they carried.
くさねえ和樹、私匂わない？
人は生きていれば代謝を続けるものだし、それに今は臭い切れというか毒ダミの苦い匂いしかしないけど。
やだな、お風呂に入りたい。
沢が見つかって水は潤沢なのだし、水浴びをしたら？佐久間さんなんか沢が見つかってすぐに私のところへ水浴びの可否を聞きに来たわよ。
いいの？
むしろ衛生面に気を配らないと皮膚病になる可能性もあるし、その辺の事情を含めて部長にはすでに許可を取り付けてあるから何も問題はないわ。私も何度か水浴びしてみたけれど気持ちいいわよ。
言ってよ、つか誘いなさいよ。私たちペアでしょ？
だって私あなたの隣で裸になるの嫌だわ。高級スポーツカーの隣に駐車された軽自動車の惨めをあなたは想像できる？
なんで車で例える？
その方があなたには分かりやすいかと思って。
I mean, what's the problem with mini cars? I love them for your information. They're cheap and easy to maintain, for one thing, but more importantly, they're incredibly light. And a wise man once said, when it comes to turning, nothing beats a low-weight car, you know?
和 和樹って時々姿が見えなくなると思っていたけど、私に隠れて水浴びなんかしてたのね。
別に隠れていたわけではないけれど、まあいいわ。薬草を摘み終わったらあなたも水浴びに行ってきたら。
そうさせてもらう。
A bath sounded fantastic, but we had other priorities. While picking the mugwort and chameleon plants we planned to use for medicinal purposes, Kazuki and I took the opportunity to search for vegetation that looked edible. It was the third day of our imprisonment in this ravine. Perhaps in the very beginning we'd assumed the vibrant mass of nature that trapped us here would also provide us with a steady supply of wild vegetables, but that optimism evaporated the moment we actually began to explore the jungle. True, carefully surveying the woods turned up something in the way of edible-looking vegetation, but the vast majority were fern sprouts, honeywort, chrysanthemum greens, and other leafy plants. More garnish than main course, none of them could fill the bellies of a group of growing teenagers. As an added bonus, pretty much all of these wild grasses and flowers proved strongly unpalatable. Eaten raw, they were unbelievably bitter, and most gave off a sharp, nasty scent. Even when boiled, the harsh, caustic taste of lye usually remained. Seasoning to disguise the flavor was an absolute necessity. The first of our supplies to vanish was the curry powder. Thanks to its strong smell and powerful taste, it violently drowned out the taste of any individual ingredient. It was our magic pixie dust, transforming anything into a tolerable meal. On the day of the fall, we'd each been distributed 2 tiny single-serving packets of curry powder to last us 3 days. Even combining my share with Kazuki's, our 4 packets didn't amount to much at all. Although Kazuki had entrusted me with all our precious supply of food, she got downright angry when I tried to make curry crochets using the powder and some potatoes. She was always strictly lecturing me about keeping our portions as small as possible, but any ingredient containing anything in the way of salt was a particular obsession. Her argument: sodium can't be produced inside the human body, therefore ingesting it from the outside is absolutely necessary.
確か植物からミネラルを取り出して塩を作る実験をしている中国の大学教授がいたわよね。
何急に。そんないきなりいたわよねとか同意を求められても知らんがな。
児童向けの科学雑誌にそんな記事が出ていたのを今ふと思い出したのだけれど、残念なことに大量の素材とそれなりの規模の装置が必要なのよね。
塩がそんなに大切なの？
今はまだ体内での調整でごまかしが効いているけど、このまま数日経って飢餓が極まった時、最後に必要になるのは塩だと思うのよ。だから今のうちにできるだけ確保しておきたいの。
一応言われた通りに塩は節約してるし、半分は使わないようにして隠してあるけど。
それは最後まで隠しておいて。それと塩を隠し持っていることも誰にも言わないで。
分かった。そうするけど。
What's the point of having salt if there's no food to put it on? If anything, it seemed like we should be stockpiling stuff that could fill our stomachs, not a condiment. Since the fall, we've been getting by on potatoes, carrots, and the weedy vegetation we picked from the forest. Without any meat or rice in our diet, we were starved for protein and carbohydrates alike. If we had to make a meal out of these scraggly, bitter plants, I'd at least have liked to stir-fry them with a little crumbled bacon, flavored with a generous helping of butter and soy sauce, and steaming white rice on the side. That's right, rice. We still had a supply of that being held in reserve, didn't we? On the second day of our training camp, heavy rain had canceled our plans to cook a big curry dinner outdoors. We'd been eating many of the ingredients from that meal, but not the rice it would have been served on. In other words, we had a 5-kilogram sack of perfectly good rice sitting in a tent somewhere. Just when were they planning to distribute that? There was no point in whining about bacon when we didn't have any, but I wanted some rice pretty badly. A nice fluffy bowl on the side would make a main dish of fried wheat steam a lot more tolerable. And if we had some shimichi mushrooms to throw in, it'd be...
Ah, キノコ。
はい。
ねえ、カズキ、キノコは？キノコなら山の中でも生えてるんじゃない？キノコを探そうよ。
やめておいた方がいいわ。キノコは危険よ。
どうして？カズキなら毒キノコと食べられるキノコ見分けがつくんじゃない？
一応知識はあるけれど、キノコは地域によって差もあるし、それに私の知識は本で得たものばかりで経験が伴わない。本で得た知識だけでキノコを食べて食中毒になるケースは今の時代になっても後を絶たないわ。キノコはダメ。
私、軸がきれいに縦に裂けるキノコは食べても平気って聞いたことあるよ。
それは俗説よ。軸が縦に裂けるキノコでも致命的な毒を持つ種類はたくさんあるわ。悪いことは言わないからキノコは諦めなさい。
いいアイデアだと思ったんだけどな。
誰か嫌な子に食べさせて 2,3 日様子を見てからみんなで食べるという手もあるけれど、
さすがにその冗談は笑えないよ。
冗談を言った覚えはないわよ。
Although she smiled slightly, Kazuki's voice wasn't amused in the slightest. She was quite seriously and neutrally informing me of a potential exchange. If we wanted edible mushrooms, we would have to sacrifice someone first. At the moment, we had edible plants, unappetizing as they might be. There was no need to risk death for the sake of a few mushrooms. But if we were to eat up all the shoots and flowers and herbs, where was our next meal going to come from? If we're forced to eat mushrooms, who takes the first bite? A road to survival we couldn't follow yet, a road not all of us could travel. Was Kazuki thinking of something like this when she spoke those words? Yesterday morning, had she already predicted that I would suggest gathering mushrooms? All of a sudden, her steady voice seemed strangely cold. I suppressed the urge to shiver.
誰だって死にたくはないでしょ。ほら、さっさと積んで戻りましょうよ。
With those words, Kazuki bent down and began to put away the plants we had gathered in the mess kit rice cooker we were using as a makeshift bucket. None of us want to die. Those brief, perfectly obvious words sent a cold shock through my body. None of us were hiding our grief or anxiety particularly well anymore. Everyone was nervous. Everyone was scared. But I realized something from the spasm of terror I felt in that moment. Somewhere deep inside, we were probably still in denial. We were still optimistically averting our eyes from the cruel reality. What are they talking about? This is getting so philosophical. The fourth day in the valley. As expected, another hot one. As early as mid-morning, it felt about 90 degrees out, if not worse. Spending time in the lush human jungle under such conditions would drain our energy surprisingly quickly, so we were told to limit our investigations of the area to the early hours of the day before the temperature reached its peak. Investigating the area might sound nice, but to be perfectly honest, we were just foraging for food. Everyone had long since burned through the 3 days' worth of food distributed to us on the first night. From today on, the system was changing. We'd be getting our daily rations from the captain every morning. And from that morning, she handed me a handful of rice, less than a cup's worth, that and maybe a quarter of an onion. This was to make do for me and Kazuki both. When I tentatively asked if this was supposed to be one meal, she firmly repeated, "This is for the day." It wouldn't have been enough for anyone, let alone young girls with growing bodies. We were expected to make up the shortfall by heading into the forest and procuring our own. As a result, most of us were forced to devote the majority of our active time to searching the woods for food. Fortunately, my partner Kazuki has as small an appetite as her diminutive frame would suggest, and even when all I could offer was a thin gruel of rice and mountain weeds, she ate steadily away without a single complaint. If anything, the problem lay in my direction.
ダメだ。全然食べ足りないよ。
アマネは体が大きいから基礎代謝が高い分、動かなくてもエネルギーを消費するものね。
Kazuki glanced over as I sucked regretfully on my gruel-soaked chopsticks, gave a little laugh, and helpfully compared me to an American gas guzzler in human form.
私の食べ残しで悪いけど、食べる？
それは和樹の分だよ。
I was honestly all too eager to gobble down any morsel offered to me, leftovers or not. Even so, it would have been a dire mistake to accept Kazuki's kindness. If our pair was a body, I was the hands and feet, while Kazuki was the head. No matter how healthy the limbs may be, they can't move unless the brain's functioning.
いいよ。あとはお茶でも飲んで我慢する。
Of course, our tea was nothing more than hot water flavored with onion skins. It wouldn't fill my stomach, to be sure, but from what Kazuki had told me, the skins were rich in antioxidants that would reduce the stress on my body, providing something of a detox effect. As I slowly sipped away at the reddish-brown tinted water, I looked around the campsite. Unsurprisingly, many of the others were sitting listlessly on their silver sleeping mats, their arms wrapped around growing stomachs.
ねえ、あれ放っておいていいの？
Clearly, I wasn't the only one longing for something to supplement our inadequate meals. A group of 3 girls had sat themselves down in a tight circle with Sakuma-senpai at their center. They were playing cards with a deck somebody must have brought along, gambling for small snacks and pieces of candy they'd been secretly hoarding. It was a common sight lately.
まあいいんじゃない？みんな楽しそうだし。あなたも混ぜてもらったら？
Kazuki put her hand in her skirt pocket and pulled out a single chocolate bar.
軍資金は私が提供するから、勝ったら分け前は私とあなたで半分ずつ。いい？
でも
負けた時は、そうね。おやつ抜きってのはどう？
もともとおやつとかねえよ。っていうか、どうして和樹がやらないの？
私が勝つと面白くないでしょ。それに私は怪我人の世話があるし、今は小出さんが一人で見ているけど、私がいないと不安らしいから。
こんな時に遊んでていいのかな？
こんな状況だからこそ、退屈すると悪い方へ考えが進みやすいし、ガス抜きは必要なのよ。無駄に動いてもお腹が空くだけだしね。それに、たかが遊びだなんて思っていてはダメね。私のペアである以上は、あなたには敗北はたとえトランプ遊びといえど、不退転の心意気を胸に、他人を蹴落としてでも利益を得る覚悟で挑んでちょうだい。
不 大点。
踏み出したら振り返らない。それがルールよ。
よくわかんないけど頑張ってみるよ。
確実な勝利を期待しているわ。
Having said her piece, Kazuki turned on her dainty heel and walked off confidently.
確実な勝利ね。
Setting the bar a little high, aren't we? Well, I guess if you had talent like Kazuki's, it might well turn out that way, but it seemed like a downright unreasonable expectation to place on an ordinary person like myself. Of course, if I had said as much to Kazuki, I'm sure she would have given me another talking to, victory secured only through the steady accumulation of effort and unflagging attention to minor precautions, or whatever. I was pretty sure she'd already told me something very similar, in fact.
と
I had actually been making something of a habit of jotting down Kazuki's words of advice over the days we'd spent together. Do your utmost to avoid placing yourself in a position where it would be forced to rely on chance. When the time comes to use a card, play it without hesitation. Betray before you're betrayed. When someone has betrayed you, never trust them again. Don't let anyone realize you don't trust them. Remember to chew your milk before you swallow. Not that I really understood most of them, especially the last one there. Chew your milk? Some kind of metaphor maybe? Well, whatever.
私も混ぜてもらっていいですか？
それは構わないけど、何かかけるもの。
チョコレートがありますけど。
へえ、君まだそんなものを隠し持ってたのか。
いえ、別に隠していたわけじゃ。それにこれは和樹が持っていたものです。
風見が？あいつ甘いものなんて興味なさそうな顔してるけど、こんなものを持っていたのは意外だね。
I couldn't deny it seemed a little out of character for Kazuki to be carrying chocolate around. That said, at this point I wouldn't really have been surprised if she pulled a pigeon out of a hat. She was clearly capable of anything.
何にせよ、チョコレートは大歓迎だ。座りなよ。
はい。
What should we do next? What's going to become of us? How long before we can go home? Immediately after the fall, every word coming out of our mouths boiled down to a variation on one of those three sentences. But as of that morning, the litany of unanswerable questions had finally trickled to a halt. By our fourth day in the valley, we'd started to adapt psychologically. Harsh as our environment was, we had our tents to shield us from the elements and our sleeping bags to keep us warm at night. As we began to find comfort in such things, we were gradually growing calmer. With the provisions distributed on the first day gone, and our daily rations reduced to a bird's helping of rice, it was only natural that the topic of our conversation shifted from such vague anxieties to the concrete topic of food. While studying the cards she'd been dealt, Kaneda-senpai muttered those words to no one in particular, like some kind of prayer. Her love for dairy was well known to the team. When practice ended and the freshmen took orders for their obligatory snack run to the nearby convenience store, she'd always request something cheesy.
ないものは仕方がないだろ。
分かっちゃいますけど、先輩だって甘いものが食べたいって言ってたじゃないですか。
甘いものは実際にあるじゃないか。キャンディーにガムにプレッツェル。それに見なよ、アマネがチョコレートを持っている。まさにカモネギじゃないか。
確かにチョコは魅力的ですよね。一番甘いですし。
Three sets of eyes focused intensely on my bar of chocolate. It felt almost like they weren't seeing anything else. For a moment, I physically cringed. If all three of them were to pounce at once, I would have been completely unable to defend myself. As I bit my lower lip and swallowed nervously, Sakuma glanced up and abruptly burst into laughter.
心配ないさ、大丈夫。確かにここ最近苦くて渋い草ばっかり食べてるせいで甘いものに飢えているのは間違いないけど、たかがチョコレートで喧嘩を始めるほど私たちも子供ではないからね。
ですよね。もしこの場に小沢先輩がいたら、それも保証の限りではないですけどね。
As she spoke, Ibuki discarded a pair of cards from her hands. True enough, Ozawa wouldn't have handled this situation well. Her juniors hadn't called her the Devourer Demon behind her back for nothing. Insensitive as it seemed, I couldn't help but think her instant death in the bus crash had at least spared her from otherwise inevitable agony. Perhaps she'd been lucky in a way.
そういえばさ、小沢ちんのバッグどうなったの？
バッグ？
ほらあの子、いっつもバッグの中にぎっしりとお菓子を隠してたでしょ。あのバッグがあれば私たちしばらく甘いものに困らないんじゃない？
先輩たちの私物はバスから回収した後、全部先生に預けましたけど。
ということはやっぱり部長が管理してるってことか。
Just then, I glanced absent-mindedly at the chocolate bar in my hand and did a bit of a double take. Come to think of it, Kazuki was the one who'd retrieved Ozawa-senpai's belongings from the bus. Could this possibly be something Kazuki secretly swiped from her bag?
どうしたアマネ？君の番だよ。
はい、ごめんなさい。
Instinctively apologizing for no particular reason, I pulled the furthest card on the right from Sakuma's hand. She chuckled softly. I'd taken the worst possible card off her hands. The Joker. If it's with you at the very end, you've lost the game. For a moment, the smirking clown staring back at me from the cheap, unlaminated playing card seemed to be wearing Kazuki's face.
結局のところさ、食料を全部管理しているのは部長と小出のペアでしょ。彼女ら自分たちだけお腹いっぱい食べてるなんてことはないよね。
From the cards I offered her, Kaneda pulled out the 8 of spades.
それはないと信じたいね。坂下はああ見えて責任感は人一倍強いし、自分だけ楽をしようとは思わないタイプだよ。
そうでしょうか。
Ibuki pulled a card from Kaneda's hand, then discarded a newly formed pair onto the central pile. By this point, she had only 4 cards remaining.
坂下部長は責任感が強いというか、自分以外の場所に責任を転嫁するのが上手なだけですよ。私、あの部長苦手です。
出たよ。またブッキーの苦手ですだ。君はそうやって何でも嫌ってみるんだね。
As Sakuma-senpai leaned over toward her, Ibuki's cheeks flushed slightly red. She thrust out her remaining 4 cards in front of her roommate's face as if trying to keep her at bay.
そうやって簡単に信じてしまう方が善人なんですか？私は善人なんて嫌です。騙されて利用されて、それでもよかった、病気の子供はいなかったんだなんて言えるほど私は成人じゃありません。
そういうとこかわいいな、ブッキーは。そろそろ髪切った方がいいね。前髪を切ればもっと可愛くなる。
余計なお世話です。私は好きでこの髪型にして、もう触らないで。
イチャつくのは二人きりの時にしてもらっていいですか？
Wrinkling her brow as if trying to hold back an imminent sneeze, Kaneda flapped her hand in the air in a signal to get on with the game already.
うちのペアは小森が飼ってる犬がいるから余計な食い口が増える分食料の減りが早いんだよね。あの犬っころ生意気に雑草なんか嫌だって全然食べないし。
そういえば犬って肉食なんじゃないんですか？
雑食なんじゃないかな。うちの近所の犬なんか散歩の途中で道端に生えてる雑草とかむしゃむしゃ食べてるの見るよ。
あ、それなんだっけ？肉ばっかり食べていると胸焼けするから食べるんじゃなかったっけ？
でも今朝だって配給の玉ねぎ食べさせようとしたけど完全にそっぽ向いて見向きもしなかったよ。
犬に玉ねぎ食べさせちゃダメですよ。犬に玉ねぎを食べさせると貧血を。
そうなの？
チョコレートもダメだって言うよね。
それこそ犬に食べさせるぐらいなら自分で食べますよ。
あー、まあね。私も小森に同じようなこと言ったらさ、なんか責任感じたみたいで。犬が食べられそうなもの探すって今日も朝からずっと山の中を歩き回ってるよ。
へえ、トリュフでも見つけてくるんですかね。
あれ？トリュフは豚が探すんじゃなかった？
何にせよ犬だけじゃなくて私たちの食べるものが問題ですよね。このまま雑草ばっかり食べててもそう長くは持ちませんよ。
Having waited 3 days, we could hold out another 7. That was Kazuki's estimate. We'd stay here for another week, sipping on wheat soup. If our rescuers hadn't arrived by then, we'd have no choice but to go get help ourselves. Most likely, the captain was preserving a stock of food for that purpose, but when I said as much, Kaneda scowled dubiously.
でもさ、救助を呼びに行くってどうやって？
As she spoke, Kaneda scratched irritably at the bandage wrapped around her forehead. The wound underneath must have been growing itchy in the humidity.
誰か一人代表者を決めてその人に水と食料を託して山を降りてもらうんです。
降りられるならとっくにそうしてるでしょうが。こんな道もないような山どうやって降りるのよ。どっちに進めばいいのかすらわからないのに。
だから部長と先生はそれを調べるために今も山に入っているんじゃないですか。
責任者の自主的な行動って言えば聞こえはいいけどさ、それって無駄に食料を減らしてるだけじゃん。いっそのこと全員で別々の方向に山を降りればいいんだよ。
だからそれは。
We didn't have nearly enough provisions for a gamble like that, and we couldn't just abandon the wounded. There was only one practical plan: endure as long as we could on these meager rations, claw open a path through the wilderness that trapped us here, hope all the while for the arrival of our rescuers. And then, once our investigations yielded something in the way of landmarks, send off a representative with 3 days' worth of food. When another 3 days passed, we could send off our second representative. By following the signs the first had left to mark the surest trail, they should make it further down the mountain. Flashing one short stick to the next, slowly but surely we would draw closer to our objective. This was an idea that had grown out of Kazuki's theoretical digital communication plan. If we could repeat this often enough, in theory we would eventually be able to escape, but there were no guarantees, and I found myself hesitant to explain.
喧嘩はやめましょうよ。それこそ無駄にお腹が減るだけじゃないですか。
喧嘩なんてしてないじゃん。話し合ってるだけだよ。
だったらその無駄にイライラした口調やめてもらっていいですか？Amaneに八つ当たりしたって仕方がないでしょう。
私がいつ八つ当たりしたってのよ。
金田、それに息吹もその辺にしときなよ。
I've often heard that a calcium deficiency makes you prone to fits of irritability, but at that moment, although all of our diets were badly imbalanced, the main cause of our crankiness was clearly the constant gnawing hunger we all shared. It's easy to be polite on a full stomach, as they say. In the end, we kept at our game of cards until Captain Sakashtia and Mr. Ochi returned from their expedition. I finished with a so-so record of 3 defeats and 4 victories. In exchange for 3 of the 12 blocks of chocolate from my bar, I obtained 4 pieces of soft candy wrapped in aluminum foil. Against the contrast of my slightly dirty palm and muddy fingernails, those spoils of Laura looked irresistibly beautiful. I brought one to my nose and inhaled deeply. At the bittersweet scent of strawberry wafting through the wrapper, my mouth was instantly overflowing with drool. There were 4 candies in my palm. If I popped one in my mouth right now, nobody would ever know. It wouldn't even be a net loss to my group. I would have lost 3 small pieces of chocolate and brought back 3 comparable chunks of sugar. As my thoughts raced unbidden through these calculations, I swallowed the spit in my mouth, but as it slid lukewarm down my throat, I came to my senses with a guilty jolt. It would be dishonest, unfair, cowardly to eat one now, nothing less than a betrayal of Kazuki, and once I betrayed her, I would probably continue to do so. That was a line I couldn't cross.
何か悩み事？あまね。どうかした？
つき、あなた、分かってて私をいじめた。
何のこと？全然わからないわ。
It really seemed like a deliberately timed appearance on her part, but even if it was a coincidence, Kazuki's luck to appear at that exact moment would have been frightening in its own right. After one long, deep breath, I jerked my head down in a bow of apology.
ごめん、和樹。私今、和樹に内緒でつまみ食いしようか悩んでた。
あら正直、そんなの黙っていればわからないのに。
わからないからこそ汚い行為なんだよ。
I held out the soft candies I'd won in the game and the remains of the chocolate bar to Kazuki. Cupping her hands gently over mine to receive them, Kazuki flashed me a satisfied smile.
大丈夫よ。それができないあなただから、私はあなたに全てを任せたのだから。はい、あんしなさい。あん。
Kazuki deftly unwrapped one of the candies as she'd received from me, then popped a small white pill into my half-open mouth.
おいしい？
The candy was unbelievably sweet to my tongue. My entire mouth was instantly flooded with the taste of sugar, and in the next moment it felt as though that vibrant sweetness was seeping into my veins and spreading throughout my body. That single piece of candy was so delicious I was actually trembling. Kazuki watched affectionately as I rolled my eyes up in bliss and swirled the candy clumsily around in my mouth, then popped another of the candies into her own mouth. And with the words, "Goodness, it really is tasty," smiled in pleasure.
でも、こういった熱量食は一人でこっそりと食べた方が美味しいのかもしれないわね。
どうして？
私の弟がそうだったの。変に禁欲的というか、好きなものをあげてもあまり喜ばないし、後で一人で隠れてこっそり食べるの。どうしてって聞けば、下手に喜ぶと誰かに取り上げられるかもしれないし、一人の方が落ち着くっていうのよね。人間は喜んでいる瞬間が一番無防備だということを すでにあの年齢で知っているのだから、さすがは私の弟ね。そういう卑屈に歪んでいるところもすごく可愛いわ。
なんだかわかるようなわからないような。
理解しない方が幸せよ。特に家族に対してすら不器用にしか生きられない人間はね。
Family? That brief word resonated painfully inside me. It felt as though an icicle had unexpectedly pierced my chest to the core. What were my parents doing right now, worrying about their missing daughter? Yeah, stopped. Okay, great. Oh man, they're really making you feel how long they're waiting for help. But them just sitting here, and they're showing all of it. You can feel how painful it is for them to be stuck like this. Bye.